But restoration does require, I think, somebody to listen to your story. Yeah. And for you to be able to tell your story. Our friend Nita Andrews calls it your talking day.
Yeah.
And to have your talking day.
Oh, man.
And to be able to enter into that. And then even how that's done. Is it matter-of-factly? Is it,
gently, kindly?
What is it that you remember even about your story?
And, as you're recalling it?
As you're recalling it, yeah. What's even available to you to recall? I mean, we've listened to people tell their story of boyhood, and they never talked about their dad, or they didn't talk about their mom at all. With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Hey, welcome friends and allies to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with SJ Jennings, talking about the 4 assumptions that we make when we do our weekends, our conferences. Yeah. Honestly, it's just to kind of have this framework with men that in order for these next hours or next days, these next sessions to really make sense or even work, you have to have had some initial work done, if that makes sense. And so, we're going to talk about restoration being available, but before that, we talked about Josh and I got to talk about you're a kingdom man.
Kingdom man, yep, your citizenship.
Mm-hmm. 2, we're at war. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of those have already been.
We talked about that,
put
right?
out there. Yeah, you and me.
Okay.
You and me. We are at war. And then 3rd is restoration is available, and then 4th is God still speaks, which I'm so excited to get to both of those. But SJ, these things are just very complementary and very connected. You know, it reminds me like the Olympic rings. They have their own color, and yet they intersect with a couple other of the rings.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of the best way to look at this. We're pulling them apart to talk about them separately, but it's kind of like, whoa, you know, we're holding them apart, but they are so significantly
magnetized together.
Maybe 50-60% of each one, you know, is overlapping.
They're interdependent.
Yeah.
Is another way to say it.
Yeah. And so this idea of restoration, I think we always kind of start it with, you know, what gets restored.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just in general, when you hear that word or you see, its context, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Restoration looks like, I think, a very individual and subjective thing for each man, each woman.
Yeah. It's funny. I was teeing you up as my car guy. Like, what does it look like?
Oh, you wanted a metaphor.
I was going for the.
You wanted a metaphor.
There's not metaphors. They're real,
right?
Yeah. Like what gets restored?
Yeah, cars get restored.
Yeah,
sure.
Man.
Motorcycles,
houses. You and I looked at my high school car one time.
Yeah, 72 Cutlass.
I saw it on the side of a road. Where were we? And I was like,
we were at St. Francis Retreat Center because we had to go buy.
We had to go to Walmart in town.
Yeah, we had to go buy a solo stove.
And there was an old garage, and there was my high school car.
Yep.
And so we talked about it. Now, since my phone has heard us, I get a regular preview of 72, 73, 71 Cutlasses. They just kind of
Hemmings Motor News.
Yeah,
and,
it's
Bring a
bizarre.
Trailer auctions and all that.
But they typically send me pictures of ones that have been restored or incredibly well kept.
Sure.
And that's a interesting part of restoration is it probably wasn't incredibly well kept, or it just has over time.
Things wear out.
And mileage and wear and tear, it needs attention. And if the more that attention is ignored, the more dilapidated? What's the word? The more
the more extensive the restoration process has to be.
Yeah.
Like you got to take it completely apart at some point.
Right.
To fully restore it. And then there's some, when just keeping it about cars now, there's some that are what you call a daily driver. So it looks great from about 20 feet away. But if you got up close to it, you'd be like, "Oh, that's Bondo," or
that's is that tape?
Those lug nuts don't match.
That's black tape.
Right.
Yeah.
But from about 20 feet out, it looks great.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about so many things in this space because, just had the Jeep in.
Yeah.
And getting the right equipment in there.
Yeah.
When you put the wrong alternator in,
things are not going to work.
Things don't work.
Yeah.
Then it snapped the belt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure the belt was, out of time.
Mm-hmm.
It just broke because it wasn't
misaligned.
Misaligned.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So there's a lot of application, for this, and I think getting into the fun of restoration, I think can really get us teed up for why it's an important assumption that you believe it exists, and that you believe it exists for you. And that we're on a journey, a sanctification journey of becoming someone that we have it in us to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got another metaphor for you.
So
right after we come back from the break.
Right after we come back on the Exploring More podcast. We'll see you in a minute.
Men are seeing higher suicide rates in this country. And
I think a lot of young men are actually
tough.
looking
Emotion
for the
is
answer to that
toxic
question.
Masculinity.
How did masculinity end up here? Being known for causing harm, being violent, overpowering, and unsafe, and being relationally destructive or relationally absent. This is not who men were created to be. Men have been the target of a long and brutal assault by an enemy that knows what we might become and fears it. At Zoweh, we believe that if men are a big part of the problem in culture today, men could be a big part of the solution. What if masculinity was safe and loving? What if masculinity was adventurous and encouraging? What if men were brave and empathetic, engaging and helpful? What if masculinity looked like Jesus, kind and strong? What if men were no longer dangerous, but dangerous for good? Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast, talking about restoration, talking about cars, talking about Jeeps, talking about all kinds of things that are very important.
It's a crossover episode.
So you had, before the break.
I just couldn't not think about, Sherry and I have restored a couple of houses.
Right.
And what I can tell you from having done that is that when you walk through it with the realtor, and of course the realtor's upselling things, like talking about things like, oh, there's great opportunity here, and this could be this, and trying to give you a vision beyond what you're seeing as you go into this house that hasn't been lived in 10 years or whatever. So, but the truth of the matter is, you get into it and you think okay, look, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do that. As soon as you start tearing into the walls, as soon as you start dismantling things, pulling old kitchen cabinets down, maybe even knocking walls down, you find 3 other things that need to be done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. It's connected.
Oh, my gosh. We took the wall out of one of the houses we were doing, and it was like, how did this place not burn down?
Yeah.
Because the wires were, just terrible. And so, okay, now we're going to bring an electrician in.
Yeah.
But
reminds me of the kids' book we used to read to our kids. You give a mouse a cookie.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
And it just leads you to these next things.
Yeah, but it just makes me think of the journey of restoration is, you there are things that you've got to approach God for, restoration of, I need these things to be taken care of before you can see what else needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Like, it's just been my experience that it's not like God says, okay, here's your list.
Punch list, yeah.
Start at the top, work to the bottom. No, you don't have awareness of some of the things that need to be taken care of and restored until you start chipping away at others. You know, the other way you've said it is we accept these packages from the enemy.
Yeah,
and we just sign for them. We talked about that at the weekend, and we put them on a shelf in the basement, and then another package gets put on in front of that, and until you start clearing some of those packages out. Until you start clearing those packages off the shelf, you really don't. You can't see what's behind it.
Yeah,
and other things that are lurking.
Much less what's in those packages. So it brings me. So back to these assumptions and how we said they play on each other. Important, significantly, that you're a kingdom man. I mean, that's critical for restoration.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're right, and I think you are, that we're at war. And things get damaged.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen the World War II pictures of a street before, after, and then after again?
And then now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
unbelievable.
In Germany and in Belgium and in Holland.
Yeah. I can't imagine walking down, the streets of Durham and all of the buildings are rubble. It's just piles of bricks and wood.
Yeah, man.
And
and so that
incredible.
Which brings me to this point that you're making. I just want to pile on and say, demo is quick and easy. I mean, taking something down. I mean, taking those walls down.
Oh yeah.
Now I see what needs to be restored, and to have something destruction versus reconstruction, restoration. These are very important things, and I think in the spiritual realm it's too. Something can, be decimated in a moment.
Yeah.
Your heart, your character, your naivety, your goodness. I mean, so that's why the assumption of we're at war is really critical, because men and women from boyhood and girlhood on have taken some shots, and it gets worse as you get older. And yet those things that happen to us when we were young, they're often the way the enemy wants to use you when you get older. I was talking with a guy recently about his boys, and they're old enough now that they enter into some school environments like middle school and high school, where his home front, this man's home front, is not just less influential. It's still very influential because it's the home front. But what the boys are subject to, even if he did a great job as a dad, his boys are going to be interacting with boys who maybe didn't have a great dad or mom. And so what does that do? What number does that do on a boy's heart when bullying, that it can happen in grade school, there's no doubt. But man, the Secret Service, the underground, the stuff that happens middle school, high school, and being subject to now, if the home front isn't challenging enough with how mom and dad handled your heart, now you're in the jungle.
Right. Oh yeah.
And the things that can happen to you, and the things that you might, endure. We were talking about baseball. We were on a baseball diamond not too long ago. You know the story I'm telling on a drive home? We were up at our friend's place, and he did a Field of Dreams baseball field, and we had a bunch of guys up there at JD's.
We were all 12 again.
We were all 12 again. We're driving home, and what did I say to you? Do you remember we were in the truck on the way home?
No, I don't remember. No.
It was very impactful.
I thought I had it, but I don't.
I told you how sorry I was.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, no, yeah. That was the baseball diamond. We were throwing the football around.
Yeah. And I know your story, which is what we want to. We do want to talk a bit about that. I knew your story, and I knew that as a boy.
Yeah, so you weren't out throwing the football with me. You were sitting with some other guys watching.
Yeah, I was watching that.
Because I can throw it pretty well, actually.
You get it there.
Don't wound me again.
I said
my arm's 53 years old.
That's
now,
right.
So.
That's true too. But I said to my another friend that was sat with me, I said, man, there was 6 or 7 guys throwing the ball, and I said, there's one quarterback out there and a bunch of linemen.
Yeah.
But they're all trying to be quarterbacks. And you weren't the one I was talking about.
That quarterback.
JD was a quarterback.
Yeah,
in high
of course
school.
he was.
So anyway, but still to be out there and to throw it around and then to take grounders and hit but I was aware that you just didn't. I know your story. You didn't get that kind of fathering or big brother. You didn't get a buddy who said, "Hey, come on, I'll show you."
Yeah.
And so, what's a boy going to do
with athletics, particularly?
Athletics, I mean. Yeah. And so, what's a boy going to do?
Yeah. Try to figure it out on his own.
Or I didn't want to play. Or I didn't want to play anyway.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
And so.
I tried to figure it out on my own and didn't go well.
And that's why you throw the way you throw. So.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was a lineman when I did play football.
Oh, I would have been afraid seeing you, because you got a good size helmet too.
That's true.
So to see you coming at me,
it was fun.
Through the line, that would not have been.
Number 66.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so back to restoration.
But yeah,
and the story.
The
stories that we have, the stories that we lived in, the stories that happened to us.
Yeah, you were sitting there watching that happen, and just told the guys, because they didn't know.
Yeah,
those guys in that particular circle didn't know. So I know SJ's story, and it's just so sad to think about that he didn't have someone there to coach him, to show him, to lead him.
Yeah,
and it led to, in my life, it led me to the agreement that I'm on my own. I'm just going to figure it out on my own, which then led to. No, even if you want to get close to me, I'm not letting you close because I don't trust you.
Yeah.
So there is restoration available for that, but I appreciate you saying that to the guys.
Why I brought it up, SJ, was just the as we think about restoration, we think about damage and neglect, and we think about things that were somehow left in the attic, put in the basement, not maybe. Just not treated well, not cared for, and the wear and tear, or just doing a lot of things can cause damage and destruction, and yet in this story, we believe, we share, we teach that there's an enemy who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and that matters of the heart matter, and so when something gets hit, something gets taken, sometimes both, there's going to be a need for some treatment. There's going to be a need for some care. And if you don't get it, if you don't get what you're supposed to get along the journey of masculinity, initiation, and validation, if you don't get it, and what you did get was hurt, you're going to need healing.
Sure.
And that healing is what brings restoration, and it takes time. I want to go back to finish that thought about, demolishing sometimes takes a button and a whole building goes down.
Right.
And picking it up and clearing it out of the way if somebody for some reason wanted where that building was. But if that's your heart, if that's your identity, it's going to take some time to rebuild those streets, to rebuild the things that have been lost. And we don't even have time to turn into grief. how it's an element of restoration. Just even feeling the loss, watching you. It wasn't because Al, you were throwing, but watching you.
Yeah, we're gonna go out and throw a little bit.
We're gonna talk a little
after
bit.
this.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we'll see how you catch the.
I just need your. So real close, fireman. But to watch you, it just reminded me you're doing so well for a guy that didn't get that growing up. So how when you say that you were 12 years old out there, that makes sense to me.
Right. Yep.
Because that should have bbeen the boys in the neighborhood with you and you with them. That should have been what your dad showed you with a grounder. You did.
Yeah.
None of us can kind of get down in that stance anymore that you need to take a ground ball.
I brought the...
You bent right over at your knees. It was so funny. And it was...
It right through me. Yeah. Yep. The Bill Buckner. Yeah. But, sorry, Bill. But,
and I did too. I mean, it's so...
Oh, I was giving you a hard time about that Olay thing you were doing.
Yeah.
You were trying to field them like in... Major League, that guy.
Yeah.
It's the coach. Enough of that Olay crap.
I'm not sure. I was going to say, those were pretty hot grounders. But by the time they got to me, they kind of weren't. So.
Yeah. But it's interesting you're talking about a moment where things break. So I played tennis in middle school, and I also played football. And then I got to freshman year and started in that and had a accident and broke my leg. Broke my ankle and had to have 6 hours of surgery to repair it. And then I was on crutches for, 4.5 months.
Yeah, that's now they call that a red shirt year.
Yeah,
but to have that taken away,
So that was it. That was it for athletics for me. I was done after that. So I can move around, but man, so I often wonder.
So SJ,
in that moment. So this is what you made me think of.
Go ahead.
You press the button and the building comes down. What's that moment where an ankle gets broken?
Yeah.
And, a foreseen or a perceived future of possibility is just.
Yeah. Hard turn. Go in another direction. And now, ironically, your ankle needs to experience some healing and restoration, in order for you to be able to walk or run again. Yeah. So there are things in the spiritual realm that do happen, and they are breakage. They are things that leave a mark, have an impression, create a ding, or worse. And so I think it's just healthy. It's important to realize that in the faith journey, part of it, a significant part of it is the comeback.
Yeah.
Is overcoming and becoming who you have it in you to be. Mm-hmm. Who God meant when he meant you. Mm-hmm. And how does that even work when I don't know? I'm not sure who I am.
Yeah, I would say my response to that immediately is the comeback from the comeback. Because so often what we do is we have a moment in time that is going to need healing, going to need restoration, and we hatch some way of dealing with it together the best we can, right?
Yeah.
And the air quotes.
It
is the best we can, but it's not really the best way.
Right.
That's why I do the air quotes, then we live however long we live with that agreement in a way to try to survive or come back from the injury.
Yeah.
And hopefully God meets us somewhere along the way and takes us back again. No, let's reinterpret that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a lot to this idea of restoration is available. And what does that look like? What does it take? Mm-hmm. And you said something at the very beginning before I made you move to cars and houses and things. You were going down. It is a peculiar thing. It's a particular thing. You said particular, but for everybody, it's a different story. It's a different fingerprint. It's a different reality. I had the privilege of walking with a couple this past week. And I mean, I think they got in the brokenness of their relationship, I know this is kind of what God was showing me and trying to help them. They got a compass and a map. And and a direction.
Yeah.
But if you think I know all the different steps to restoration for them, you're crazy. Yeah. I could hear hints. I could in the story work, I could hear things and could feel things like, oh, that's not good.
Kind of like a guide would, like see those clouds on the mountain over there, or hear that there's a river nearby.
When we were talking about the Carolina wrens, these little bitty brown birds that are so freaking loud.
They're so loud.
And so I don't have to see the bird. I can hear the noise. That's a Carolina wren. Mm-hmm. So when some people are telling their stories, you could travel back in time and see, what happened, but you don't have to see or to actually hear the pain, to hear or the indifference. That's a whole other thing.
Oh yeah.
When somebody's telling you a story and you're like, wow.
Yeah,
that sounds.
But it wasn't that. I moved on. It wasn't that.
Sounds
big
horrible.
And they're kind of nonchalant.
So you're feeling worse,
right?
than they are. So. I like what, so in order, and one of the things that we're pretty high on and champion is story work. Do you know your story? Mm-hmm. Just like this couple, they heard things that each other shared about their own personal boyhood or girlhood. I'd never heard her share that before. It's very helpful. Here's what Dan Allender says. Story does not give you answers, but it does give you perspective. Mm-hmm. A perspective of what you didn't get as a boy in terms of coaching and encouragement and an opportunity to see what you might become in particularly some sports spaces. So this is kind of the thing that I want to position on the table. I have passages about restoration. Here's what I'm just going to say about that, friends. You should go to your concordance or you should go to your Bible app and just type in restore.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, that'll get you restoration. That'll get you dozens of verses about this theme of recovery. That's another great word. Recovery is available, maybe, but restoration is available. So hopefully you can trust me on that.
I think the Strong's Concordance is an app now.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah,
I mean NIV Study Bible.
Yeah,
but YouVersion has a pretty good.
They do.
The Bible app has a pretty good concordance. If you just type it in there, you'll see all these implications of passages. So. Story work, though. We're talking about story and being able to tell your story and having somebody who's a good listener listen to your story. And that's the beginning, I think, SJ, of restoration work. If you can't answer the question, well, what happened to you? Mm-hmm. Tell me your story. Mm-hmm. Help me understand why you feel the way you do, why you think the way you do. Because the last thing any of us wants to be told is how to think and feel.
Oh, yeah.
And yet it's so critical to start with, well, why do you think and feel the way you do? I'm not looking for correction. I'm looking for companionship in that.
Yeah, man. Even just today, a guy was texting with me. Actually, he was texting with both of us. And he was telling us about a little bit of a situation. And I almost said, wow, that must feel XYZ. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. So I delete. Hey, man, how does that feel?
Yeah.
Right? It's just such a better question. So it's better to ask a question. And it's a better way to approach rather than assuming how somebody
You
must
actually
feel.
asked, how does that feel to be so open-ended? I remember.
Okay, yeah.
How does that feel to be so open-ended?
Yeah, and what I was going to say was, that must feel crappy being so open-ended.
Yeah.
Like that's how it would feel to me. Mm-hmm. So
sometimes empathy is that. Can I draw on something within me?
No question.
To relate to that can help me relate to you. But I'm
right.
not,
But I think
I'm
it requires the initiation.
I'm not trying to tell you about that so that now it's not you, it's me. Let's talk about me. So anyway, as we've learned more and more the craft of listening.
Yeah.
So, but restoration does require, I think, somebody to listen to your story. Yeah. And for you to be able to tell your story. Our friend Nita Andrews calls it your talking day.
Yeah.
And to have your talking day.
Man.
And to be able to enter into that. And then even how that's done. Is it matter-of-factly? Is it,
gently, kindly?
What is it that you remember even about your story?
As you're recalling it?
As you're recalling it, yeah. What's even available to you to recall? I mean, we've listened to people tell their story of boyhood and they never talked about their dad, or they didn't talk about their mom at all.
Right.
Or they didn't talk about church, and then you say, well, where was the faith? When did the faith piece come in? I went to church all our lives. I mean, it's just not that that's wrong. It's just there's so much. My point is there's so much there. There's so much there.
Yeah.
That is really important.
There's a lot of intel there. This Allender quote came up for me as we were talking about this. Healing in this life is not the resolution of our past. It is the use of our past to draw us into deeper relationship with God and His purposes for our lives. We need a new understanding of how to deal with past hurts. Yeah. One that acknowledges the damage to the human spirit while charting a path toward the abundant life God promises. Yeah. That's from The Healing Path.
It's a great book. Very much about story work.
Talk about, absolutely. And reinterpretation, Yeah.
Yeah. And there's healing. It just takes time and it takes care. If you think about physical wounds and how you regenerate tissue,
it's incredible.
And how little neosporin or polysporin. I mean, some of those ointments go a long way. And there's things in nature that you can rub on it.
Salves.
I think in Lord of the Rings when he puts he puts some weed in his mouth, chews on it, and sticks it in Frodo's puncture. Yeah. So there's a way some things work, and I think the spiritual realm is inviting us to see through even the physical healing. Some things like ankles, things that get broken, take time, and they become. So we got a couple minutes left, and so restoration is available. We started to talk a little bit about how it works, but what does Jesus have to do with that anyway? I'd like to kind of land in that space.
Well, I've been doing a good amount of talking. Why don't you answer that question? Unless you wanted to hear what I had to say.
I do. I can swing, though, and say that there's so many different ways. I was looking at the spine of some of my books in my office, and there was Oswald Chambers' My Utmost. And I think about, I've read some of his stuff in moments that have been very helpful, with perspective, that have been very caring and inviting. So I think of how does Jesus have anything to do with this? Well, I think he has a lot of resources in the medicine cabinet.
Oh yeah.
And I've begun to see that over the last decade or so, and even my own writing. And there's things there's elements of that sometimes that are healing for me. I do think there's a difference between attention and care and comfort that can lead to healing. And we'll talk about God still speaking in the next episode. But that was very healing to me, to not just read either one of God's agents or read God's word. Those are always helpful. But to encounter God, like to hear him speak to my heart, through my heart, in my heart, to hear him say something. Different names that I've been named by God, by Jesus. How do you see me? So those are restorative things. Those are healing things. If that's how you see me, then that must be who I am.
Yeah.
And that's healing when what I've heard and felt is in contrast to that.
Right.
And that you don't belong or you're not worth. No, you do belong. And you're worth this to me. So again, reading about that stuff is good. And I don't want to ever second class the scriptures. But right there is in the restorative work I think that God has planned for us is encounters with him.
Yeah. I think it's the both and. Man.
Yeah. Amen.
And the story work and the work that we encourage for restoration, healing, training, all of that paired with the reading of the Word, the reading of Scripture. It just when you said, what's Jesus got to do with this? My immediate thought was we need an interpreter. We need a guide.
Yeah.
We need someone to walk with us in this.
Yeah.
And that's his role in my mind,
Yeah. And to even consent, I think of signing it. To consent to Jesus, I'm going to sign it, consent form, to consent to Jesus to just surprise me. Mm-hmm. It's on your terms. It's in your time.
Man. It's hilarious, isn't it?
And
we sometimes go to Jesus like, here's what you need to know.
Yeah. Here's what I want you to do. Yeah. And, going back to that baseball field, our friend Mike Glenn, Elder Sage, lefty, played high school. We come off the field, and we'd had a great time. It was really fun. But there was no doubt something happened when we crossed the line of first base and third base. When we stepped on the field, it was like big when the boy, is almost the reverse of that. When Tom Hanks is going home and he in one moment he's wearing a suit and he's 12.
He's 12 again. Yeah.
That's what happened. Mm-hmm. I know it did for all of us. We all felt young.
Yeah. Sandlot.
And Mike said, as we came off the field and kind of put our grown-up back on, he said, I think they built this field for me. Something was tended to in him. Yeah. Something extravagant took place for Mike. And we all had our own, even just to put a mitt on, and pop. So what I'm trying to say, I don't know who's, I'm not saying anybody out there is skeptical right now. I'm just saying there are wild ways in which restoration is available. It can be a picture that is of you, but you haven't seen it in a long time. It's been in that drawer for a decade. And you're looking for something else, and boom. Yeah. So there is, if there's restoration, this is the last thing to say, there is restoration. And because there's restoration, that means there's an original. Right. There means there's a new, there's something that
an image for it to be restored to.
Yeah. And we believe that is a unique image in which you or Caleb or I uniquely bear the image of God. We're image bearers. He wanted his image bearers back. His image bearers have been through quite a journey in the jungle, in the World War II, in the destructive spaces of fallenness. And being a kingdom citizen comes with the benefit of restoration. Yeah. So here's a compass, friends. Here's a map. Be careful. It's easy to misinterpret. But And we would say, I know you'd say this, we would agree with Jerry Sitzer, go east into the darkness. Your compass points east.
Right.
That's the quickest way to the sun,
mm-hmm.
is to go east into the darkness with Jesus and see, what do you want to restore?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to restore in me? What needs restoration in me, Jesus? I sign it, consent form, got a compass, a map. You are a light unto my feet, right? And a lamp unto my path.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I love that thought and that idea. That's one of those quotes you share. Every time we share it, it's like, ooh.
Yeah, the whole crowd goes, whoa.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think I like the how that you shared, the story work. So maybe we can include a link to a story timeline exercise in the comments below.
Yeah.
So guys can enter in.
Yeah.
You know?
It's funny what's in the vault.
Oh, man.
When you start getting into scenes from your 4th grade and 5th grade, and then there's kids that you hadn't talked about or remembered or thought of for the last time it was you talked about 4th grade.
Right.
So restoration's available, friends. And hopefully we have given you just a taste of why it's important, and that it's something Jesus is up to. It's something that I need so bad, and it's something you get to do with him. So thank you for joining us on the Exploring More podcast. We'll see you next time as we hit the 4th assumption of God speaking. Does God speak? Is he speaking?
We'll find out.
We'll talk about
our next guest on the Exploring More
podcast. That's right. See you next time.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.